And hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of the DuoDive with Katie and Trusty. Once again, you're here on the Trusty Huckster Mercantile channel. Thanks so much for joining. Those of you who are here for the live chat. Of course, I've got Katie coming in from Vintage and Vinyl, talking about her air conditioning here while I'm
Yeah.
trying to turn my furnace. But from Florida. How you doing tonight, Katie?
I'm doing fabulous, Patrick, and I'm so excited about this. I just love all that elegant and beautiful depression glass, so this should be a whole lot of fun.
Well, we definitely wanted to do another duo dive on Depression era glass, and we could not think of a better person to bring in than Depression Glass guy himself. So we've got Jonathan's coming in, his Instagram. We've been rating the Instagram channels to bring people into the duo dive, and we found Jonathan, who is crossing the fence between the YouTube, some YouTube presentations for the Michigan Depression Glass Society, group I highly recommend everyone try and follow on YouTube, but he has his own channel, Depression Glass Guy. And so Jonathan is joining us tonight with his partner, Kevin. Appreciate the two of them making time out of their schedule since they are planning their wedding in just a couple of months. So good luck. Just planning any wedding, but the fact that you actually have time to join us on our channel is very touching, and really appreciate you giving us your time. So how are you gentlemen doing tonight?
We're good. We're a couple days before the 90-day mark, so I think if you caught us
Not that you're counting it out or anything.
of our availability, so we're very happy to be here tonight.
Well, excellent. We're so happy to have you both. So I know you've got a couple special things scheduled for tonight, and I will apologize in advance. I am having some technical difficulties, so I will be primarily giving the screen to Jonathan. If I disappear, Katie will take care of everything. But we'll start out with Jonathan and Kevin. Why don't you guys introduce yourself and go ahead and start the presentation.
Sure. So I'm Jonathan Furman, and I've been collecting vintage glassware for about 20 years now. So I inherited some from my grandmother, and which is I think how a lot of people really start. So a set of pink depression glass, and got a little bit curious about what this was, and went to my first depression glass show. Our club, the Michigan Depression Glass Society, holds an annual show the first weekend in November here in the Detroit area with 24 dealers from across the country. So once I walked into that room of 15,000 square feet of glassware, I was blown away and hooked, and I've been collecting ever since.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Ryan, and I'm a relative newcomer to this whole depression glass thing. Although I have been collecting antiques for most of my life. My mother is and was an antique collector, and it's something that she passed on to me as well. And so I've enjoyed collecting pieces, historic pieces, things from World War I, historic furniture, that sort of thing. And then when I met Jonathan, was exposed to this beautiful world of elegant glass, depression glass, it opened up a whole other thing for me to learn about, to start collecting and enjoying. I'm a musician by trade, and so I really appreciate the artistic element of this glass and the idea that not only are we preserving pieces of American history, but by collecting this stuff, you're also preserving art, handmade artistic objects that are quite beautiful. So we're both excited to be here tonight and to share some of our barware collection with all of you.
And since this is a barware presentation, I think it's only fitting that we start out by making a cocktail. So this is something that Kevin made for me, I think, the first time I went over to his place a little over a year ago. So we are going to, Kevin's going to tell you what a Bouvardier is and show us how to make it.
Yeah, so I'm sure many of you out there have had a classic Negroni before. The nice thing about the Negroni is it's really easy to make because it's all equal parts. It's usually a Negroni is made with gin, red vermouth, and Campari. But then I was at a restaurant in Paris, and they served me a riff on the Negroni called a Bouvardier, and that's what we're going to make for you today. And a Bouvardier is like a Negroni, except you use bourbon or whiskey in place of the gin. So we'll go over that with you now. Jonathan, tell us about the glasses that we're going to be using.
Yeah. So a lot of the glassware I have on the table is from the Cambridge Glass Company, because that's one of the things I collect. So this is called the, a lot of times these patterns didn't have names. This is the 520 etch by Cambridge. And I've been collecting this pattern for about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years. And it all started when my mom's friend saw a neighbor of hers throwing out 6 dinner plates in the pattern, and they were literally like in the trash at the curb. So she rescued them and gave them to me. And then, of course, if you have 6 dinner plates, you need 6 function plates, 6 cups and saucers, and 6 tumblers and 6 sherbets, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I just kept collecting that pattern, as one does.
So to make the drink, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fill our glass with ice. And the first component, and the classic component of the Boulevardier, is the Campari. And we are going to be using 1 ounce of Campari per drink. So I have 2 ounces here, and I'm going to put 1 ounce in the bottom of each of our glasses here, trying to be equitable with our pour.
Yeah, I don't want to get jipped here.
Yeah. And then the second element of the Boulevardier is the red vermouth. So we're using Dolan red vermouth, and it's the same ratio. So it's 1 ounce or 1 part now of the red vermouth. And that's going to go into each glass as well. And now here's where the Negroni differs a little bit in terms of ratios from the Boulevardier. Normally the Negroni would be a 1-1-1 ratio, but for the bourbon, and we're using Elijah Craig, I believe, for our bourbon today, we're going to use 1.5 ounces. There's something about the bourbon that need a little bit more to get that perfect balance for this drink. So 1.5 ounces is going into each one.
And that's the recipe. So as you'll note here, this is pure alcohol with some ice in it. There's no,
No filler.
No club soda, no lemon juice, no lime juice. So we're just going to sip on this casually throughout the evening here so we can actually keep talking and presenting to you.
Yes. And then you would stir this a couple times through to make sure everything is nice and melted. And you'll notice that as you're drinking it and the ice starts to melt and the water incorporates, it sort of tones down the Campari, which is very, very viscous and a little bitter. And you get this beautiful drink. I would recommend serving it with an orange peel or a lemon twist, which we don't have right now. But if you have it at home, that would be the perfect final component here. So here is our
and cheers to everyone out there that's watching us.
Here's
tonight.
our Boulevardier.
So that's what you serve to the guests that are late so they can catch up with everybody.
Yeah.
So Katie and I decided to join in. I discovered I literally have 0 Depression glass stemware in the house. So I went with my BC glass that my grandmother got at a gas station at some point in the 70s, I believe. So that's as old as we get. However, I did bring the hors d'oeuvres on a bonbon, Fostoria bonbon dish that has the June etch to it. So that's my contribution to the party tonight.
Fabulous. And I have my uranium glass cocktail glass. I'm not exactly sure if this is a champagne flute or something a little taller. Maybe a martini glass. I'm not 100% sure, but this was sent to me from Vinny at Vintage Vinny. So I think it's just fantastic. And I love that it glows. I think that I know the pattern, but I'm not 100% sure. It does have that beautiful optic to it. So my guess would be Anchor Hawking or Hawking glass, but not 100% sure.
And what do you have in it tonight?
So tonight I just have some of my favorite Gosling's ginger beer. I love ginger beer, and we've got some of that.
Awesome.
Well, you have to drain it every time somebody comments in the chat that you are trying to irradiate yourself because you're drinking out of uranium glass.
I know, right?
So we will move away from uranium glass and go back to the presentation.
Yeah.
But we are all imbibing, and Susan is my spirit animal. She also has a BC glass, which we did not plan this, so I think that is fantastic.
That's awesome, Susan.
So I think what we'll start off here is actually talking about some of the stemware I have here. So this is actually my favorite pattern. I'm going to try to pick up one of the gold encrusted pieces here. Hopefully that'll show up a little bit on camera. But it's called the Candlelight Etching. It's by the Cambridge Glass Company. You can see it's got a medallion in there with a lit candle and then a lot of scroll work and some flowers. So it actually comes in a couple different styles. This is a gold encrusted version. Most of the ones I have here are crystal etched, and then it also did come in a cut style as well. So this was actually hand cut on a cutting wheel. But
So the different lengths of the stemware, and you may be talking about this in your presentation, were those predefined? Like, did all companies have a certain height, or were they designed for certain types of drink? Or like, why would you have the different bowls and the different stem heights?
Yeah, so I'd say every company pretty much stuck to a standard line of items that would be produced. I mean, everyone had a tall sherbet, a water goblet, a wine, a claret, things like that. But they will vary in height between company, not by a whole lot, by a little bit. And actually, one of the things that you will find is a lot of these patterns have been, in production 10, 20 years. So and you got to keep in mind that a goblet like this is hand blown. So you have the top here that's blown. You have the stem that is molded, and then the foot is attached. So this is entirely handcrafted. So even within the same Stemware line, I mean, it's not going to be much, but you will even find a little bit of slight variance, because if something's being produced for 20 years and it's made by 50 different glass blowers completely by hand, there's always going to be a little give or take on them.
So that's interesting. So the bowls of the Stemware were, I knew that they were blown, but I just always assumed they were blown into a mold. So you're saying they were completely hand blown?
It will vary by the company. I mean, for example, I have this is one of my favorite stems here. This is by the Tiffin Glass Company, or sorry, I'm not Tiffin, Fry. And this is what a lot of collectors call watermelon, because it's got the green stem, and then the top here and the foot are pink. But as you can see in this one, there's this really nice optic pattern. So this particular one would have been blown into a mold. Some of these could be molded, some might be completely hand formed. A lot of times they are blown into a mold, but sometimes they are, free formed as well. But as you can see here, this candlelight pattern, I don't have all the pieces here. I think I have a dozen right now, but I'm still missing some. And this is not even their most prolific pattern. I mean, Rose Point by the Cambridge Glass Company was probably their biggest line. And I don't know, there might be 30 different stems in that one. I think I have maybe 10 here and I'm missing 5 or 6, but I just thought I'd go through and kind of show you real quick what some of the differences are. So
was there a pattern, was there a style of Stemware that was unique to candlelight? Or were all of these bowls could have been etched with any of the combinations? I know sometimes they have a specific shape.
So actually came on a couple different Stemware lines. This is probably the most predominant one. Just by the stem, it was their line 3111. But that Stemware line was also used to etch various other patterns as well. So that's one of the nice things as well, is that if you can identify a Stemware line and you know the shape of the stem, then you can tell a piece is Cambridge. So even if you don't know what the etched pattern is, the fact that you're familiar with the Stemware line will give you a good clue of it being Cambridge glass.
That's a nice jumping off point for sure.
Mm-hmm. So here I have, I know a lot of people, when you see this in an antique store, will misclassify this as a water goblet. Or sorry, as a wine glass. It actually is a water goblet. I mean, in today's society, we would probably use wine in that. And then here we have a iced tea glass. So these are kind of the bigger pieces in the pattern. And then next up here, I have a tall sherbet. And then this is the low sherbet. So you have two sizes of sherbet. Now, one of the things you'll note is a lot of times these companies are making glassware before, during, and after Prohibition. So when Prohibition comes about, the glass companies are, not really legally going to make glassware for illegal beverages. So a lot of times they're continuing to make this barware, but they're retitling things. So this tall, this actually would have been called a champagne when it was originally marketed. Then it had to be reclassified as a tall sherbet, wink, wink. And then we could, go back to calling it a champagne later. But that's something you'll see that a lot of the companies did. They might have had a cocktail shaker or, a tall martini pitcher, and it was originally a martini pitcher, and then it was relabeled a tomato juice pitcher for a few years before going back to, the martini. So, a few little tricks of the trade here when it came to glass. But then some of the smaller pieces here, that actually is a wine stem. That's not, you think that may be a cordial or something. So we're gonna hold up here. We have water versus wine. So, if you're using that as a wine, you're not gonna get much to drink, which is, and Kevin will talk here in a little bit about, maybe some suggestions for using some of these things. Because if you're using that to serve a red or white wine, you're going to be getting up every 2 to 3 minutes to refill your guest glasses.
Well, and consider also the fact that the time that this was made in the 1930s and 40s, American food culture was very different, and we weren't drinking copious amounts of wine like we are today. So you probably didn't need more than a little sip. And honestly, I bet the wine at that time wasn't that great. So I don't think you would want more than this much. So it has a lot to do with the fact of when this was produced in the 30s and the 40s, and how our American food and wine culture has really evolved since then.
Now, you may or may not know this because it does kind of go back into the marketing side of things, but like I found that example interesting because we just did an entire Downton Abbey Edwardian dinner table. We talked about sherry glasses and port glasses and hock glasses and all this stuff. How do you know if something was designed to be part of a set? Would the stems all be the same height, or would they all be the same style? Because obviously you're going to have a white wine, you're going to have a red wine, you're going to have all the different versions. But how do you know if something was designed to go together other than just the etch? Or is that the only way?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell not only does this all have the same etch, but it's all the same stemware line. So you kind of have this ribbed stem, there's a little ball here, and then it goes into the goblet. So you can see that this stemware line was entirely meant to go together.
Yeah, the stems really give it away, but you can also see that the artisans made the flare at the top very similar as well.
Yeah, so that's pretty
So
uniform.
just by looking at this set, you can all tell that from the same line production.
Okay, that's really good, really cool to see. Now, so if you had a candlelight etch that had a different stem, and this is probably more of a personal preference, but in your case, would you set a table with multiple variations of stem, or would you try and keep the stem together if the etches are together?
I typically would try to keep the stem together. I actually have an example here. I just pulled out of the cabinet behind me. Let's see if we can kind of hold up this wine glass here. So these are both etched candlelight, but you can see here, the one I'm holding has a much more modern looking stem. It's these concentric rings versus that one, which looks a lot more elegant. So I have one example of this is just to have. But I personally don't like this stem. I think the etching is very elegant, and the stem to me looks too modern. So I generally don't mix and match, but it's not to say that you couldn't.
Now, with the stems being different, do they have a different etch number, or since they're the same etch, they would be the same?
Yep, so it's the same etching number. It's just the stemware line is different. So this is always called candlelight, no matter what blank it's on, but the actual stems are different. So that was the 3111 line, and I actually don't remember the line number for this, but candlelight came on predominantly 3 different stemware lines.
Wonderful.
And how long was candlelight offered? Like you said, some of these were 20 to 30 years. Was this offered throughout Cambridge's life, or?
No, it was a fairly, relatively moderate run, I'd say. The pattern was introduced in 1936, and then the factory closed in 54, so that's when it was discontinued. There was a slight reopen period for a couple of years, like in 56 and 57, and there were some limited pieces available, like you could buy, water goblets and luncheon plates and stuff like that. So it's kind of, 15, 20-year run.
Excellent.
Yep, and then going into just a few of the other pieces here, this is actually a cocktail glass that we have. This would be a juice, but, and that's not to say, Kevin, what would you suggest here? You don't have to use this as a juice. You could use this as what? Champagne potentially, or
potentially, or something like a sweet wine to go with a cheese course. Yeah, there's a lot of. The juice glass is it's pretty full up, maybe 4 ounces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 4 or 5.
But it's a really sweet size, and it's really nice to hold.
I'm always stymied by the water glass versus the red wine glass.
Yeah.
So when you held up the tea glass, I would have considered that the water goblet.
Yeah.
A lot of people nowadays, if they're setting a table with depression glass, will use the iced tea glass as the water glass because it holds the most volume.
And we have one other stem here before we go into some of the flat pieces. This is the oyster. So, not a fan of this. I've had, raw.
I'm sorry, the oyster?
It's an oyster, and
An oyster what? For a beverage?
So I don't know if you know the recipe for this. It's like a raw oyster and I think it's a Tabasco sauce. And you're shooting a raw oyster, which I've never tried and never will. Not my cup of tea, but
and they made a specific glass for that. That is fascinating.
So, but I think, what would you use this for? What would you suggest?
How about a nice little bit of ice cream?
Yeah. And then there are a couple of flat items. So I'm going to start out with the more standard ones. This is actually quite a rare piece. I'm really lucky to actually have both of these. They did make an old fashioned and a shot glass.
Oh, I didn't realize they did those.
Yeah. Now these are very, very rare and hard to come by. And I only have most of the stemware here. I have 8 pieces of because I have kind of a service for 8. But I only have a couple of those. And then they did make a couple flat items. This is like a flat soda tumbler, and then we have this really nice bell-shaped tumbler as well.
So what would you have had in the bell-shaped tumbler?
What would you recommend for that?
Well, what would they have served it in it?
It was originally designed as a water glass.
But nowadays, if you wanted to differentiate, maybe you were serving both a white wine and a red wine with dinner, perhaps start with the white wine in the bell tumbler, which will sit on the table, and then use the water goblet as your red wine glass. And then the height differential really will showcase white wine, red wine.
And then the last piece I have here is a shrimp cocktail. So this is actually an icer with a liner. So this was designed that you would put crushed ice in here, put the liner on top, and then put your cocktail sauce in and your little shrimp around the edges. But I like finding new uses for glassware, and not only in my Stemware, but just everyday items that I use. So for me and for us, this actually makes the perfect brandy glass.
Now, for something like that has two pieces, I would say if I ever saw that in a store, first of all, I would never know that that was a cocktail or a shrimp cocktail glass, but I'm sure the insert would be gone. So how valuable is finding a pair of those kept together?
I'd say, I've been fortunate enough to find them together a lot of times. I'd say the bigger issue is because that insert is being set into the glass, a lot of times the lower glass has a lot of chipping to it. That's the bigger thing to look out for. I don't feel that they get separated. I feel that the top chips the bottom.
Okay. And is there a different, would that same insert be in the rose point etch is the piece itself etched, the insert, or just the glass?
No, it's just the glass.
Okay.
I think they probably did that is that if you had, an etched item and then sitting inside the etch, it would just be too much pattern, in each other.
Gotcha.
Now, how would those have been sold? Could someone buy that individually to add to their line, like for a wedding gift, or would you have bought the whole line and gotten that with it?
Yeah, so a lot of times, Candlelight, I think, and even Candlelight, I think is maybe about 150 pieces to the set. Rose Point by the Cambridge Glass Company had over 200. I know a lot of collectors today are trying to, have one example of everything. I might be a little bit guilty of that, but this was really designed to have a wide breadth of items, and that you could continue adding to that set over the years. So you weren't meant to buy every single piece. You were meant to buy the pieces that you liked, that you thought would be practical. And the nice thing about it too is that, yeah, you might get Rose Point or Candlelight as a wedding gift, but then your significant other knew to buy that for you every year. So you might get a candy dish or a pair of candlesticks, and friends knew for significant anniversaries. Let's say you're having a 10-year anniversary party. That pattern was continuing to be produced, and kind of continue adding to that set over a long period of time.
Now, one of the things that leads into is a question from the viewers, Tim from Canada. When we did the Downton Abbey Edwardian dinner, which obviously slightly earlier era than what you're talking about, that one definitely had, each course had its own wine, and you did the 10-course dinner. You had, one had the hock, one had the brandy, one had what. Once we've moved past Prohibition, which is somewhat the era that you're saying that the candlelight etch was offered, what was the design when you were buying for your home or you're getting the wedding present? Was it as extensive? Was there a different beverage for every course? Or was there more standards? Like you just need a wine glass, you just need a juice glass. What was there kind of a rule of thumb, or how did they market it?
Well, I think there were the main pieces that everyone wanted. Everyone needed a water glass. Everyone needed a wine glass. And then beyond that, the pieces sort of become ancillary. And you'll see, he has a really large collection here, but this is not even all the stemware that Cambridge offered. There were tiny little cordial glasses. There were claret glasses, which is a type of wine. So you're talking, they had a 1 ounce glass, a 1.5 ounce glass, a 2 ounce glass, a 3 ounce glass, all the way up to the big water goblet. So I'm not totally versed on what a dinner service would have been like in the late 30s, early 40s. I think a lot of American society was pretty strapped for cash at that point. They were coming out of the Great Depression. So I wouldn't be surprised if things weren't quite as elegant and coursed out as they were in the 20th century. But you would definitely make sure that you have, I think everyone wanted to make sure that they had at least some water glasses, and maybe a sherbet for champagne, and then probably a wine glass of some kind.
And one of the things to note too is that when you're talking about entertaining, when you're looking for these patterns, a lot of times stemware is really prolific and there's a lot of it and it's quite affordable. And the reason behind that is that at the time, people are buying all this crystal to go with their dinnerware services. And while ladies might have luncheons and bridge clubs and things like that and have afternoon tea on a cup and saucer and a lunch plate, it's really not in vogue to use glassware for a full dinner service. So that's why a lot of times people may have just bought stemware and maybe a bowl and a pair of candlesticks to put in the center of their table, but they may not have bought the entire line. So that's why a lot of times when you're looking at these patterns, you'll see a lot of luncheon plates and cups and saucers and creamers and sugars because that was produced for a bridge set and ladies' lunch and stuff like that. And then there's a lot of stemware available because that was used for dinner. But when you get into a lot of the serving pieces and especially dinner plates, like in this candlelight pattern, are very, very rare because it just wasn't in vogue to be using something like that. But that's
Interesting. Now, one of the questions that came in kind of related to that is going back to the shrimp cocktail, the glass with the insert. Would there have been a dedicated, like a matching plate where the glass set into it? Or I assume they would have used an underplate of some sort, but would it have been something specific to that piece or just a regular Cambridge glass plate or even a China plate?
Yeah, Cambridge didn't actually make a specific liner for that. So like when I use them, I'll just put it on top of a luncheon plate.
Excellent.
And
Thank you, Brenda.
Stuff is really affordable, and I mean a lot of the stems were here. I mean not the rare shot glasses, but a lot of times water goblets, iced tea glasses you can find for $12, $15, $18. Sherbets are not as popular, so 8, 10, 12. And a lot of times at antique malls and stuff. And that's one of the things I like about not only this pattern, but all the barware on the table is I consider it, one, to be very utilitarian. It was designed to be used. I mean, this is not museum quality stuff that should be in a china cabinet and never taken out. But when you look at the quality and the craftsmanship of it versus what you could buy in a department store today, you're getting way better quality than a potential import product. And a lot of times the price points are at or even below what you would be paying at retail prices today for new items.
I totally agree. Now, you talked about the quality of this. So how do you go about cleaning some of this depression glass? I'm sure you wouldn't recommend dishwasher.
No. This absolutely does not go in the dishwasher. I know a lot of times when we're having a dinner party, and especially if we've done a 5-course dinner or something, and there's 6 people here, and you've got 30 stems to wash, and it's 11:45 at night, just put it on the counter and save it till the morning. This absolutely should never go in the dishwasher. Not only is it too fragile for just the water jets and heat cycles, but also a lot of times those dishwasher tabs or detergents can have little cleaning pellets in them, for pots and pans, and that'll actually etch your glassware. And once that's happened, there's really no salvaging it.
Wonderful.
And then, moving on to some of the other stuff on the table here, we can't just talk all about Cambridge here, even though that's a lot of what I have, but I'm just going to point out a few more cool pieces from the collection. This is very, very fun. I actually got this recently.
Oh, wow.
So this is, again, by the Cambridge Glass Company. It's this center-handled tray here, and there's actually 6 little cobalt blue glasses. This would be, after dinner. Fill each of these with limoncello or a Di Serono or something like that, and bring it out to the table. And that way you have a nice little thing to carry it on and present it as well. And actually, since you mentioned our wedding, I have to give a shout out to my friend David. He's very much involved in the Cambridge Glass Museum, National Cambridge Glass Collectors, and he knew I've always admired these statuesque line of goblets. We actually gave these to us a little bit early as a wedding gift, so we're gonna have a pair of these on our head table. But this is another cool stemware line that was made by the Cambridge Glass Company. It's called the statuesque line. So it's actually a Figural woman here in the nude holding up a goblet. And these came in a lot of different colors as well as different sizes. I mean, just well over a dozen items. And I have to tell a little bit of a funny story. I actually saw these in an antique mall recently, and because there are some exposed breasts here. Somebody took one of those, garage sale price stickers and put it over here to kind of cover up a little bit. So
That's great. Just last week we did a last DuoDive. Katie hosted, and it was my collection of Figural flower frogs, and I actually showed all of my deco ladies, and many of them were Cambridge, and showed. And I did not realize that they were also available as stemware.
Yep. And Kevin just picked up an item here. I forgot to bring some spoons to stir the Bouvardier, so he grabbed a muddler here. But Cambridge actually did make glass muddlers, so if you want to,
which is exactly one of the questions that was in the chat. So you read their mind.
Perfect. So yeah, if you want to, pound a mint leaf to make a mint julep or something. I mean, these came in. I have a couple amber ones here, but they came in crystal, blue, red, all kinds of different colors. So you're ready to muddle your drink with those as well.
And how common are the muddlers compared to, say, the shrimp cocktail or the shot glasses?
I don't think they're as common. I mean, they're by no means rare. I think I got a set of those pretty cheap, probably like $40 for the set. But I'd say a lot of times those muddlers, the crystal ones are $15 or something, very, very affordable.
I have a feeling that's going to be one of those items that right now I will say I've never seen one. And the next time I walk into an antique store, they're all going to hit me in the face because I probably saw them and didn't know what they were.
Well, and a lot of times I've seen them in antique stores, and I mean, they kind of have that look. Is that, I mean, they're not quite symmetrical, but people will sometimes mistake them for a knife rust, which they're not. They actually are a muddler. And then one of the other kind of cool things here is if you don't want to imbibe too much, just want to have a little cordial here. This is another little glass that Cambridge made. Just a little, like 1 ounce. These actually could be used as either a little shot glass, but they were also favor vases. I know Heisey called them. I don't know what Cambridge had a name for them. But these would actually be, you could put a couple little flowers and have one of these at each lady's place setting during a luncheon,
little bud,
and put a little a flower in there or something like that.
Now, one of the questions that's coming in, since we've covered so many different stemwares and beverages, obviously beer would have existed back then, but was there a dedicated Depression glass, or was that always just, destined for a stein or something like that?
Yeah, so there actually we have one example of a beer mug here. This is more kind of kitschy, 1940s, 50s. This is actually made by the Hazel Atlas Glass Company. There's a whole bunch of, I think one of the more popular lines that you'll see are the ones with the pink dancing elephants. And the reason they made that pattern was that it's rumored that if you drank too much, you'd be able to actually start seeing dancing elephants around you. This particular series has some sheet music on it and then corresponding figurines. So I think this is probably a song from the 1920s, but Daisy, Daisy, tell me your answer true. That sheet music, and then Daisy on, the song is Bicycle Built for Two. So there's Daisy on her little bicycle with her, I don't know, her bow there too. And the song, the lyric is, I'll be damned if I'll be crammed on a bicycle built for two. So that's an example of one from Hazel Atlas in the 1940s and 50s. But Cambridge, Heisey, all the elegant glass companies made beer mugs as well.
Mm-hmm. But
Excellent.
I've never seen an elegant glass beer mug, but when we did a presentation earlier on wine and beer and serving that with Depression glass, you could absolutely use one of the classic tall tumblers. This would serve you really well as a beer glass.
Excellent.
Or I don't like beer, so I'll drink it out of that little tiny shot glass and be done. And then one of the other things we have here by Cambridge, a lot of times, there's partnerships between different companies. So, Cambridge did a lot of their own etchings and cuttings, but a lot of times these elegant glassware companies would sell their glassware to other companies that would use it, as a decorating blank and make a cutting or something like that. And that's actually one of the partnerships here. We have a couple examples of pieces in Farberware holders. So, here's a little, probably like a wine glass and a Farberware holder, and then a couple of decanters, and even a cocktail shaker. So
now for the piece that Kevin just held up, or that piece as well, it is Farberware. I'm familiar with the term of Chromecraft, but were there other versions of that or other brands that was sold under?
Yeah. So so Chromecraft was kind of the product line. Farberware was the manufacturer. But yes, that's kind of the predominant one. There were a few other metalware companies, and actually Cambridge also sold some of their blanks to sterling silver companies. So some of those little shot glasses and stuff you'll find with a sterling silver holder. But yeah, Chromecraft or Farberware was very, very prolific and predominantly, I mean, there are other pieces like nappy dishes, and I have a really cool one upstairs called the Silent Butler, where you'd actually use it to sweep crumbs into. But I'd say the predominant thing that they tended to make a lot of was the barware. So Cambridge would, make the glass, Farberware would make the metalware, and then they, sell it to department stores.
Now we're only showcasing two of the colors. So you have this beautiful amber, and then what they called amethyst, which is the purplish color. But it also came in a green. It also came in blue. So you'll find Chromecraft quite a bit if you're going to the antique malls or the antique stores. You see a lot of it.
And actually, some of the glasses, I don't know if it's necessarily the specific one, but some of the glassware you occasionally will find in crystal with etchings on it. They didn't do it with candlelight, but I know they did it with Chantilly, Rose Point, and a few other pieces. So that's a possibility to find as well.
And Shayna is asking or commenting, did Farberware partner with other glass companies? Would you find other glass in the Chromecraft line?
Yeah, they didn't have an exclusive partnership with Cambridge, but I feel like a lot of it is Cambridge because Kevin actually has some Farberware over in his cabinet that he thought was Heather Bloom by the Cambridge Glass Company, but when he brought it home, I was like, no, that's somebody else's glassware. So yeah, they didn't have an exclusive partnership.
I love the look of Chromecraft, particularly some of those the deeper jewel tone colors. But I've never seen it with the etched glass. I did not realize the connection with Cambridge. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's another example. So here's a beautiful decanter without the chrome attachment, and then here's one with the chrome attachment.
And actually, it's interesting because this piece right here would have been sold plain without the chrome, but you could also buy it with. So it wasn't a completely separate piece of glass. It just was either inserted or not into that. And you'll see here, we have this purple one here. There's also that amber one, but they came in different sizes too. So that would be for a cordial. This would be maybe for a different liqueur. I think there's one bigger than this, and then Cambridge made all.
Now, in the amber one, I can see the petal design that comes up the side that Cambridge patented. Is it on the purple as well?
Yep, it is on the purple.
Okay, I just couldn't see it. I didn't know if they changed it to go into the chrome.
Pick up that piece. Actually, I'm going to hold that one. And if Kevin picks up the cocktail shaker, you'll see that same ribbing on that as well. So you can see it's almost like if you were to put a handkerchief at the bottom of the glass, a square handkerchief, and draw it up to form these kind of corners. So that's another thing so Cambridge, that actually was their 3400 line. Very, very popular. The candlelight etching was produced on that for tableware, Rose Point, a lot of other pieces as well. So again, even though you may not know the pattern, if you see that design of the kind of those, that handkerchief coming up into, 4 points along the sides of something, it's Cambridge.
Now, talking about the colors, I know that some colors are a little bit more common than others, and purple glass is something in general I don't see a lot of compared to the amber. So what is the common color for that particular line?
Yeah, like Kevin was saying, they made Farberware in all different colors. That's actually one of the things that I'm still learning, and I find challenging about collecting some of these patterns like Cambridge or Heisey or things like that is, unfortunately, there isn't a hard, fast rule to say that, if, let's say, from least expensive to most expensive, okay, we have amber, purple, red, then blue. That doesn't always follow a certain chart. There could be a particular vase that might be really common in blue and really rare in red, but the inverse is true in a cocktail set, and the cocktail shaker is, really rare in one and not the other. So I will say that, generally, I think the ambers tend to be a little bit less pricey than some of the blues, reds, or purples, but it's just one of those things that you really have to know your glass, research it, look at closed auctions on eBay and things like that to see what things have sold for, to get an idea of what may be rare or not in a certain color.
And related to that, we have a question coming in from Tim in Canada. Are any of these glasses marked?
So a lot of companies mark their glassware, with a trademark symbol. So Cambridge was known for their triangle C, so it's a triangle shape with a C in the center. Heisey was known for their diamond H, so again, a diamond with an H in the center. And I know Heisey actually advertised that they marked every piece of glassware, and that is true to a certain extent, but a lot of times it was done with a paper label. And there's a lot of controversy around these markings because on the Cambridge luncheon plates and Heisey plates, a lot of times you're seeing those diamonds, and some people are like, I don't want that on my beautiful table setting. So I don't know if we have any examples of things on the table that are marked. I know none of those stemware would be.
The Heisey moon.
But yeah, like we should give some love here to Heisey, not just talk about Cambridge the whole night. So this is a pattern. This is that we actually started collecting together called Twist by the Heisey Glass Company in the moon gleam color. And you're not going to be able to see this on camera, but there is that diamond H on the bottom of every piece, kind of in the center there.
Well, and commenting on what you had said earlier, last summer I did a video where I actually toured the Cambridge Glass Museum, and I recorded the docent giving part of the tour, and she actually said Cambridge only marked the glass for a short period of time because they started getting complaints from the women, the ladies who lunch doing their dinner parties saying, I don't want that showing through my whatever. And so they started doing, very early on, they started just doing the foil labels, and it makes it ridiculously difficult to then make sure you find something that's that is actually technically Cambridge if it doesn't have a specific etch.
Right. And I did just look, I don't know if you want to pull up that amber one there. This is kind of interesting. Like, so even, we're talking about different sizes of stemware, different sizes of, cocktail shakers. This is the same decagon line by the Cambridge Glass Company, but you have the small versus the large ice bucket. And I know this larger one has, these are both marked with the triangle C on the bottom. So that's indicative of Cambridge.
And I know that shape is very similar to something that Fostoria did as well, I believe.
Yeah. And speaking of glass museums, if you have the time, whether it's visiting Cambridge, Heisey, Fostoria, Tiffin, it's a really great experience to be able to see all this glassware and great educational experience to learn. If you are in the Midwest and want to make a little bit of a road trip or, farther away, all these glass museums are honestly within an hour or two of each other. So, make a long weekend trip and visit some of them because it's really educational to see all this stuff in person.
Excellent.
So let's showcase.
I was going to do one more here. So we already talked about the naked Cambridge lady here. This is another really cool item that was kind of,
Bottoms up.
It's a bottoms up glass. So you can see this lady has her little naked bottom here. And the idea would be that you have this nice little holder here to, set it in and present it. But I would fill this up with bourbon and hand it over to Kevin here. And he cannot, the bottom is completely round, as the lady's bottom is, and he cannot set that glass down until he has finished drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that's an example just from what I've come across. There are, whether they're reproductions, recreations, whatever the case, that are much, much later than the original generation of that. For some of the etches, the stemware, some of the designs that you've shown, were they unique to their time, or did some of that get regenerated after, say Cambridge closed down, or just as generations changed? Do you see newer versions of some of the pieces you have?
Yeah, like you were saying, that bottoms up glass, that's one made by the McKee Glass Company in the 1920s. And I had kind of that flesh tone, but it came in jadeite and other colors. But actually, Mosser Glass of Cambridge, Ohio, owns that mold, and they most recently have started producing it in kind of a deeper milk glass blue color, and I think a white as well. But their stuff is, marked and things like that. So, but yeah, a lot of this stuff is very unique to the era, and most of it really can't be reproduced. Just the labor cost it would take to try to make some of this stuff. And, unfortunately, the prices aren't really high enough that it would even be worth reproducing by the time you developed a custom mold and, the etching process and everything else. It's just, you're not going to make a profit trying to, fake any of this.
Excellent. Now, I want to make sure we keep our eye on our time. And so we've had a couple of questions come in on specific pieces. One, you have a couple other chrome topped pieces, and I wasn't sure if those were included. I know they're not chrome craft, but they're still Farberware. And then we have a specific question about that cool amber covered pitcher with the underplate.
Okay, sure. So these, and I have one more example here. There's a ton of cocktail shakers that were made in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s that have kind of these, silk screen decals on them. So even though they are metal lids, a lot of these are made by Hazel Atlas, but various companies made them. Even though they have the metal lid, these were not made by necessarily Craft. There's various other manufacturers that did that. A lot of times there's just cocktail shakers, but there you will find that there can be a whole set of things. So this is a little kind of desert scene with a camel and a cocktail shaker and a little glass. There would probably be an old-fashioned glass as well. So you might, get a whole set with 8 or 10 different styles of item.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, we do not want to be responsible for you shattering a piece of your glass.
Shipping, it's good.
I'll blame your cat. I don't care what's on video. I'll just blame your cat.
Yeah.
So this piece that was asked about, this is made by the Cambridge Glass Company. And this is actually what's called a syrup set. So you would use the syrup obviously in here, and there was a dedicated underplate for it to catch any of the drippings that was specifically designed and made to hold the syrup. And then it has a lid as well. So this is
this may be a stupid question, but when you poured the syrup, were you supposed to take the lid off? Or is there a hole for it to come out? I would think it would tip off the top if you tried to pour it.
Yeah, if you cover it, you can't pour it. So
so there's no gap or anything in the, okay.
That's right. So you would have removed the lid to serve. Yeah.
And like we talked about earlier, this was actually designed, this is really used for maple syrup at breakfast for pancakes, but I like using glass for different things. And like in the fall, like around Thanksgiving time, we might set up a kind of help yourself bar in the house. And I'd probably put a little label so people knew what it was, but maybe some simple syrup in that, either plain or infused with rosemary or something like that, so people could help themselves and make their own cocktail.
Man, I need cooler friends. So that's a question. One of my questions, and I'm sorry, I was going to catch you, Kevin, before you put it down.
Yeah.
If a lot of the times, as a reseller or even as a collector, if you don't know the pieces, you don't know what you don't know. If you found the pitcher by itself, you wouldn't know it would have an underplate, but would you know that lid, is there a rim or something that you would know that the lid was missing if you just found that glass pitcher in the wild? Sometimes they'll have like a ledge or something.
There's a clear inner lid.
Okay, so you would know that you're missing the lid. Okay.
You could definitely tell that there should have been a lid.
That's good.
Yeah.
Now, Nate,
Always a struggle with like open sugar bowls. Like, well, is it an open sugar bowl or are you just missing the lid?
Yes. Or butter dishes are the same way.
Yep.
Now, Nate has a question I thought was interesting. He asked earlier if there's any U.S. companies that make Toastmaster glasses, the ones that appear to look the same as small wine glasses but have a slight optical illusion, whereby the glass is thicker and it holds less.
I don't think anybody made that. No.
Very interesting.
That's okay. You're allowed. We're not here to play Stump the Experts, but we appreciate you playing.
Yeah.
That brings up an interesting point though about the thickness of the glass, and it's something that we talked about. That's interesting. And Jonathan had mentioned, so these glasses that we are drinking out, these Boulevardier glasses, these were produced earlier in Cambridge's history, and the glass is very thin and very delicate. And as Jonathan was saying, that made them very susceptible to chipping. And so as Cambridge evolved and they produced glass lines later on, the glass is much thicker and more durable. So you can see how the companies evolved with customer feedback.
Yeah, if I had knocked, I don't remember what I hit this with, but if I had knocked into that, it definitely would have chipped.
Oh, wow.
And can that help data piece as well?
Ooh, good question.
Potentially, but and when Kevin's talking about, when we look at this, Heisey Moongleam twist here,
it's a hardy piece of glass.
It's a hardy piece of glass. It's very thick. This is, I would say, let me just look at thickness here. It's maybe a quarter, thicker as a percentage, like 25% thicker. It's not anything crazy. It still is, very elegant and refined. But I don't think that's necessarily a solid way to date how old something is.
Now you talked a lot about how the different shaped bowls and everything would dictate what beverage would go in them. You haven't talked as much about the decanters. So you've shown different types. You have one very cool one that's the tallest. It looks like the tallest on the table, kind of like the Aladdin bottle there, or the genie bottle. That looks like a perfume bottle to me, a very large perfume bottle. But what would that have been used for?
Yeah, and we have a couple examples here. So this is actually I tried to bring in a little bit of depression glass. So this is the cameo pattern by Anchor Hawking. But yeah, these it's called, just like it says, a decanter. It would have been used to decant, this one, Kevin can talk to that one. This would have been used for wine. So, to decant your red wine into, let it breathe and aerate a little bit. That one is actually probably more of a liqueur bottle.
A liqueur bottle.
Yeah. And then we have another decanter there. This actually, this again would be for liquor, but I think this is again a Hazel Atlas item. So it says rye on there.
Rye
but they made rye, whiskey, gin, bourbon, all those different bottles as well. So a lot of times it's just
Okay, I'll just say, Kevin, you picked that up, and it was like a big game of which one of these is not like the other. It was hiding in the background, waiting to leap out at all of us. What's the really tall, clear one on the far edge of the table there?
So the Heisey Glass Company made quite a few varieties of cocktail shakers, and this is one of their larger ones. So you can see this is quite large.
Wow.
Unetched cocktail shaker made by Heisey. Very cool piece here because can you hold the bottom for me?
Yeah.
It actually is 3 components. There's the main vessel, and then the strainer pour is its own piece, and then the cap is its own piece.
Amazing.
Beautiful 3 pieces that you would have used to have a cocktail, and then you didn't need a separate strainer. You could pour right out of the glass. And unlike this Chrome Crafty Cambridge one, which has a metal strainer on the top, which is made out of the chrome, the Heisey one, the strainer is actually made out of glass as well. Just a different technique, different styling. So
now we have a question in the chat that may be related to this. What is the most expensive piece on the table? I'm suddenly leaning toward that.
You would think so, but Heisey produced a lot of utilitarian ware like that for hotels, for bars. So you can find.
I can't even find cocktail shakers with their metal lids still attached. The idea that all 3 of those pieces would still be intact is infinitesimal in my world.
If you went onto eBay and typed in Heisey cocktail shakers, I think you'd be surprised at how many are available.
I'd say there's quite a few pieces here that are probably in the $100 range. The one that may surprise you is I'm going to go back to this candlelight shot glass. I have a couple of these, and they're very rare, and I had to pay $100 a piece to get them. So
wow, that's incredible.
I would say the syrup set up here quite expensive.
And also the cameo pattern by Anchor Hawking, that green depression glass one. I'm not sure what these are going for these days. I think back in the day, the book value on that used to be maybe $150, $175. It might only be, I don't know.
Brenda's mentioning something called Heath Bloom. Did you have an example of that? That term does not sound familiar.
Yeah, we have Heather Bloom on the table. This is a very light lavender color produced by Cambridge. One of their more
pretty,
and probably definitely more expensive than most of the crystal. So these
that is beautiful.
And this, you can see again, this, if you want to hold it, maybe this piece. Yeah. So those are the same stemware line. And this one that I'm holding is a different stemware line.
But they're all Heather Bloom.
And actually, so if Kevin keeps holding those up, you can see that's the 3111 line. So here is my crystal sherbet and candlelight. And then the one in Kevin's left hand there is the Heather Bloom sherbet. So it's the same stemware line. It's just that his has a Heather Bloom goblet, whereas mine is entirely crystal.
And I'm sorry, is the Heather Bloom the color, the etch, or the shape?
The color.
Yeah.
The color, okay.
Yeah, Heather Bloom was one of the earlier Cambridge colors. It was only produced for, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 years. Not a whole lot of time.
And so that'd be why it would be that much rarer. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
And does that change color under any type of UV or black light?
The Heather Bloom?
No, the Heather Bloom doesn't, but Fostoria made a similar pattern or similar color called Wisteria, and there's a couple other I know Tiffin made Twilight and a few other things. It's actually, if you look on YouTube under the Michigan Depression Glass Society, I actually did a table setting about Fostoria Wisteria, and it's dichroic glassware. So it's almost like a periwinkle color in fluorescent lighting, but then it turns a very nice purple in daylight.
Yes, I find that glass fascinating. And I am interested back to the tall clear glass cocktail shaker you showed. The design of that looks very much like some of those old pharmaceutical bottles. And would they have converted any of their molds to make some of these pieces?
I'm not as familiar with Heisey, but I know Cambridge made some little bit of labware or even very salesman stuff. So they made glassware for like a long piece that would have different perfume samples in it that a perfume salesman would take out. So even though a lot of these companies did make predominantly consumer wear, there were scientific and business applications as well. And I want to mention one really cool thing on that tall cocktail shaker. It does come etched in a variety of patterns, but one of my favorite is that there's one version where there is on the back side of the cocktail shaker, kind of up high, is a Victorian house, and on the front side is like this driveway with a horse and carriage that's like approaching the house. So I mean,
So if you turn it correctly, you can see the three-dimensional image.
Oh, neat.
That would be wonderful to have.
Now you touched on this on some of the different colors. We've got a question from Lucinda about the clear glass. Have you ever tested the clear glass to see if it glows under black light?
No.
From Cambridge.
Yeah, and just speaking on color really quick, just so everyone's aware, glassware in its natural state, the silica is typically a crystal type color. And how you get all these different colors is by adding chemicals to it. So cobalt actually creates the blue color. I don't know all the different minerals that create the yellows and the purples and etc. But every glass company had very patented secret formulas that only a couple chemists knew for how Cambridge got their heather bloom versus Fostoria's wisteria. But yeah, the color in the glassware is actually gotten by the chemicals and natural minerals that are added to the glass batch as it's being melted.
And there was a comment in the chat about it being uranium. There are other chemicals that will glow as well.
Yeah,
can glow different colors. So just it's always something of interest to people. Love to see the glow if they can. But yeah, that piece of uranium, I'm sure would.
Backlight with me, but the pieces on the table that we have would glow would be the Heisey twist here as well as that cameo decanter, and that's because depleted uranium would have been used to get this color. And if you put that under a black light, yes, it will glow.
Now, are you familiar? There's a question coming in that I'm not sure the combination. It's saying Morgantown Queen Louise pattern.
Yes.
So there's a question, is that the most expensive pattern?
It's definitely up there. I would love to own a piece. I don't currently. I've admired it at our glass show a couple years ago. There was one guy, because it's something you'll typically see one piece of here and there, and this one guy had probably 12 stems, which was mind-blowing. But if you look on eBay or Google Images to see a picture, this pattern it's an etching, and it's got this kind of a queen and kind of a cameo, but the etching is colored. I mean, it's got her flesh tones, and you can see her blouse is kind of a white, and yeah, that is probably one of the most expensive patterns. I mean, I think a lot of times when you see a piece like that, a stem is $200-300. It's pretty expensive, but I mean, there's other rare things out there. I mean, Heisey, we were just admiring at our glass show the tangerine color by Heisey, which is orange, and you don't see any orange on this table, and orange really isn't a common color for elegant glass, but Heisey had a color called tangerine. It was only made for a couple of years, but again, owning a piece of that, we're talking $250, $350 per stem. I mean, very, very expensive. Very rare. I'm jealous of the Heisey collectors out there, and that's one of the things I recommend too. If you're into glass, there's groups on Facebook for Heisey, Cambridge, Fostoria, and if you join those, people are posting pictures of their collections and their table settings, and you just drool when you see somebody's got not only 6 Heisey tangerine water goblets, but they've set 6 place settings, and each place setting has 5 stems, and your jaw just kind of drops.
And one of the things that I showcased when I did the tour of the Cambridge Museum, and have you two visited the Cambridge Museum?
Yeah. Yes, many times.
So if you remember, there's the section in the back where they show, and I can't remember exactly what it was called. I should have checked my notes, but where they basically had either the experimental colors or the basically stuff that never made it into production. Yeah. Do you have anything in your collection that if you effectively feel is a one-off end of day, what is maybe not necessarily absolutely unique, but at least particularly rare?
Yeah, not in the barware stuff. And I mean, when you look at Cambridge and Fostoria and companies like that, a lot of times those are called lunchbox glass because people are dinking around in the factory at the end of the day and they sneak into their lunchbox and take it home. So those pieces are really relatively few and far between, as opposed to something like the Fenton Art Glass Company in Williamstown, West Virginia, who was in business for about 100 years. They really encouraged their employees to fool around and make one-of-a-kind items. And when they had Fenton conventions, they would make 5 of something and sell it. So I do have a few pieces of Fenton that are maybe 1, 2, 3 of a kind type thing, but a lot of the Cambridge and Heisey one-offs are really quite expensive, and I can't say I haven't encountered one that's been in the wild and affordable for me to own yet. But I'm constantly scouring for that one rare piece.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to keep you sensitive on time because I said we keep this an hour, and you guys genuinely have many more important things to do than hang out with us. But I do want to appreciate and thank you for all the time. The chat seemed to really enjoy the presentation, a lot of discussion, and I'm glad to see so many questions coming in. So thank you again for joining us. Do you have anything other than your pending nuptials? Do you have anything coming up through the Michigan Depression Glass Society? Anything that you're planning on the glass front that we should be watching for?
It's been a busy couple weeks for us. I just did a presentation on glassware for a local garden club, and brought in a lot of vases and things like that. We're doing this tonight, and then actually, we've been collecting this moon gleam twist pattern for about a year, and that's actually what I've been drinking out of here is this water goblet. The Michigan Depression Glass Society, we in the Detroit area, we meet the first Monday of each month. So in the March meeting, we're doing a table setting on moon gleam twist. So if you follow the Michigan Depression Glass Society on Facebook, you'll be able to see some pictures of that. I don't know if we're gonna, maybe we might try to set up an iPad and do a video like that. But otherwise, just working on a lot of wedding planning. We're trying to keep costs down and whatnot. So we bought some mirrors from IKEA, and we're going to be using a lot of our candlesticks and compotes and candy dishes and things like that to decorate the tables. So it should be really fun.
That is absolutely fantastic. So everyone is wishing you the best of luck on your upcoming wedding. We get our best wishes as well.
Yes.
And again, a great thank you for joining us in a very busy time. So this was fascinating. I'm so glad you agreed to do it, and appreciate you both participating in it. It's great that you're doing this together, that you have this joint interest, and glad you could share it with us. So thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone in the chat for hanging out. Thanks for giving us your time. Thanks for putting your trust in Trusty Huxter. We'll talk to you all again later. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.